Welcome into episode 36 of the Woo Pig Weekly Podcast, your weekly source for all things Arkansas Razorbacks. Episode 36 is brought to you by University Traditions. Go check out their hat designs and use promo code VSN15 to receive 15% off your order thanks to Variety Sports Network. So we'll jump in here with Arkansas football getting closer and closer day by day. And a fun thing we decided to do here on the Woo Pig Weekly Podcast is we're going to start breaking down Arkansas's position groups and, what we kind of see. And, there's some more groups out there besides the one that we covered today that probably have more of a unknown appeal about them. Whereas today's group, we're going to cover the quarterbacks, which that one's kind of black and white, set in stone. Your starter is going to be KJ Jefferson, pending any, throughout the season if he gets banged up, which we hope that's not the case. But we're kind of going to go through and discuss what we see with this, position group and who we think could be the backup and what we could see going, forward here throughout the season. So like I said, we start out here with your starting quarterback, redshirt senior KJ Jefferson, 6'3", 246 pounds. Last season, he finished 204 of 300 for 68% pass completion rate. He had finished with 2,648 yards with 24 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, which he averaged 240.7 yards per game, and he also had 158 rushes for 640 yards and 9 touchdowns. I mean, it's hard to get much better and more efficient than that when you look at a guy that commands your offense.
Yeah, man. I mean, if you really just look at last year's numbers, the passing yards per game weren't just completely eye-popping, but we did have a pretty outstanding run game to kind of complement that from KJ. But the two things that stick out to me that really get me excited for this coming year with Danny Nelson, maybe kind of letting him air it out a little bit more than maybe we're even used to, is that 68% completion percentage. So he's an accurate passer. I know Kendall set him up on some easy completion screen type passes and things like that, and that does help. But Enos can run that style as well. There was quite a few slip screens and things like that back in that 2015, 2016 offense. I think Enos is going to continue the pattern of finding easy completions for KJ early on to get him in rhythm. I think that's some of the most successful games he had when he could kind of get going early, and then the run game followed up after that for him really, really well. But the other thing that sticks out is the touchdown to interception ratio. It's really, really solid. 5 interceptions on the whole year, and I know for a fact I think 2 of those were not his fault. So realistically, 3 questionable passes that turned into interceptions on the entire year. So we talked about it in a couple of episodes prior, just his ball control, I guess if you want to call it that, is outstanding. I mean, he had a couple of fumbles that cost us. Obviously, that A&M game comes to mind. So a few things to maybe shore up there. But overall, I mean, you can't ask for much better out of a player from top to bottom. Just his ability to run, his ability to throw, his accuracy. All those things combined, I think he's primed for a really good year. I think a lot of things are going to depend on how well our offensive line can protect him and then who steps up in the receiving positions.
That's very true. And you read my mind there. When you have a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, that's, he really protects the ball. It doesn't make, dumb decisions with the ball. He really takes care of it. And like you said, with that 68% completion rate, we'll see if he continues that this year. I think he will. Because to me, I think his accuracy may be a little bit underrated compared to, some other guys that, you see, they do air it out a lot in the offense. So that's something that would be nice to see. And then, so when you move on for your second string guy, you're back up to KJ, that's where things get, a little debatable on who could it be. You've got 3 really reliable options here. You've got redshirt junior Jacoby Criswell that transferred in from last season playing at North Carolina. You've got freshman Malachi Singleton. And then you also have redshirt senior Cade Fortin, who's coming back that has some experience playing with Arkansas from the previous year. But I really think your 2 options are either going to be Jacoby Criswell and Malachi Singleton. When you talk about these 2 guys, they're guys that are both very similarly built to KJ. Criswell's stats, last season for North Carolina, he only went 2 for 6 for 9 yards and 4 rushes for 39 yards. So not a lot of playing time. To be fair, they've got a stud quarterback up there as well. So, that's one thing to consider. But then you also, Malachi Singleton, I think he's got a lot of talent that remains to be seen. They both look decent in the spring game. So I think it'll come down to really who's developed over the summer and really dove into that playbook and going through fall camp, who really buys into that. So looking at these two guys, what do you think, Seth, on how the depth chart could shake out with KJ's backup?
Man, you look at both of them just from a stature and size. They're almost identical. I mean, they're both 6'1", at least that's what they're listed at. And Jacoby is 224, and then Malachi Singleton's 232 pounds. So I mean, they're just kind of neck and neck as far as size and weight, if that makes sense. So I don't think there'll be a deciding factor when it comes to that. If you'd want somebody in there that's kind of a bigger bruiser type guy, if you're going to kind of have them come in and maybe do some more run plays more than they may have KJ do just to try to save KJ's body. I don't know. I wouldn't really expect that, but just from the outside looking in, not knowing a whole lot about Malachi, and frankly, not really knowing a whole lot about Jacoby, my main thought would just be you would go with a guy that's got more collegiate experience, and that would be Jacoby Criswell. However, I don't think Pittman is scared to throw somebody out there that he thinks is more SEC game ready or has shown, more hype in practice or whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see both of these guys off and on throughout the year, especially in games where, we maybe have things locked up if we're up, 30, 40 points or something against some of our non-conference. I think you'll see both of these guys off and on, try to get them some reps, just kind of see what you have in game. This practice only shows you so much. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them earlier on in the season off and on. And then to your point, if there's any injury situations, I mean, who's to say? It'll probably be one of those things where Pittman doesn't even know until game day, just kind of who had the best practice, who's looked the most game ready based off of, potential game reps that they've gotten in other games. But my gut feeling would be Jacoby would, on your depth chart, kind of be your number two, but that could easily change just from the talent that Malachi Singleton has and the speed. I think just from what I've heard, Singleton is probably a bit faster than Criswell. So if you're wanting to kind of use him to scramble a little bit more, then maybe that's your deciding factor, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing that gives me confidence this year, yeah, you had Browse last year that had some interesting play calling, but I think what you really got to look at is with Enos coming in, he's been known in the past to be a really good quarterback developer. Just look what he did with the Allen brothers when they were here. Nothing against them, but they weren't crazy talented like some of these guys that are on the roster right now. They were really great players, but these guys have, I think more athletic ability than both the Allen brothers did. And so it'll be interesting to me to see what kind of development he's able to do with these guys. And I think to your point, I hope to see them this year. If we're up in a game, you give these guys some reps. I think that's the only way guys are going to learn. Not saying that might have helped some of our guys last year to get more in-game rep, but you never know. Like you said, practice can only go so far when you're playing against, your own team. They're not going to be as intense as like an actual SEC game. So I think that's something you look at. And I agree with you. I think the edge goes to Criswell just at least for the beginning of the season due to having some collegiate experience. My only drawbacks there is he is a redshirt junior, and his few years at North Carolina didn't really get a whole lot of playing time. So that kind of makes me wonder a little bit, but I'm glad he's came back home. Maybe it's a fresh start that he needed. So it'll be interesting to see. And then, towards the bottom of that depth chart, we mentioned you got Cade Fortin from last year. He's a redshirt senior that got the extra COVID year. He's 6'3", 215. Last year, he went 14 of 29 for 48%, 0.3 completion percentage. You had 135 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 7 rushes for 17 yards. And then redshirt freshman Riker Acebo, that's 6'4", 192 from Jonesboro, Arkansas. He redshirted last year, so he's another guy that really, I think he's probably one of those walk-on guys that, home state kid that really wanted to play for Arkansas, and, he's here. So I think that's kind of where your depth chart shakes out. I mean, do you think anything different there from, how we've got that listed out?
No, not really. I will say, don't be surprised if Cade Fortin blossoms a little bit more than maybe we saw the few outings he had last year under Bryles. I think he's more of a pocket style passer that would theoretically fit a Dan Enos offense a good bit more than Cade Fortin fit a Kendall Bryles offense. So I'm not going to say he's going to be the number 2 guy or anything like that. I really do think it's going to be Jacoby that's the number 2. But just based off of, how Enos wants to play, if Cade Fortin shines in practice, I would not be surprised if he actually works his way up the depth chart kind of into that number 2 spot. There's potential for that. Don't count him out. I don't think he's a bad player at all. I don't think he had a situation where he fit very well the couple of times he got to play last year. And I do think the style of offense that Enos runs will fit his game a little bit better. He's a taller quarterback to be able to see and everything. And I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a glimmer come out of him if absolutely necessary, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't see the field at all either. I could see both ways kind of for him. I could see some development, but at the same time, he's a redshirt senior. So there could be some thought process of, I need to focus with my younger guys that are my future. I don't know.
Yeah, that's some good takes there. And so while we're on the subject of quarterbacks, I saw a video today that, our buddy SEC Mike talked to Ty Richardson at SEC Media Days, and he asked him, and he brought up a good point. He asked him, out of 3 games, which game do you think could be an essentially upset game for Arkansas? He had Alabama, LSU, and Missouri. We'll forget about the Missouri one because that one's just weird. But Ty Richardson had something interesting to say, which got me thinking, in all of our matchups with Alabama, it's been a few years since Arkansas has really had the advantage at the quarterback position over Alabama. And that his opinion was this year could be the year that we have that. And it's been a while. The last one he can remember is a few years ago when it was Brandon Allen versus Coker at Alabama, when, we kind of probably had the edge. But I think when you look at that, especially with, he mentioned he really doesn't think Saban knows who's going to start this year for him at quarterback. We had our guy that we talked about last week that came in and, backed up Bryce Young last year, but, they've gotten a transfer from Notre Dame. They've got a few other guys that came in, so I think that could be an interesting viewpoint as we talk about quarterbacks looking into some of these games this year. What do you think?
Well, if you just look at Alabama specifically, I think the one thing that could give us the edge when we play Alabama, they're loaded at basically every other position. And heck, that kid that transferred in from Notre Dame, he was not bad at all. I can't remember his name. I remember if I can see his face plain as day. Anyways, he was not bad at Notre Dame at all, and he kind of got thrown into the fire there. I think they've got some potential, but I do think where we've got the edge at the quarterback position right now, just in my mind, is the ability to avoid turnovers. In the previous years when we played Alabama, we kind of I'm not going to say we had them on the ropes, but we were able to kind of capitalize off some turnovers and create our own turnovers with the onside kick last year that was just out of nowhere and was really awesome. But I think that is going to be a critical factor in potentially being able to upset Alabama, is the fact that I think we'll be able to protect the ball a bit better than they may be able to, and that they've been used to with Bryce Young at the helm. I mean, he was a phenomenal quarterback that protected the ball well, and then they ran the ball well. I mean, he did everything right. He was a great quarterback for them. So having a step back, I think, as far as the ball protection goes, could be a deciding factor for us in a stout matchup of a game, realistically. I agree. I think we've got the edge at quarterback. I think they may have the edge on some other position players and probably their offensive, defensive line, things like that. I think we're good. I think they're probably just a little bit better just based off of their roster. But if you can win the turnover margin in a big game like that, just due to maybe some inexperience at their quarterback position, that can change a game in a hurry. And I think that's where we could really see an edge go our way in that game.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I think that's the case. And, they mentioned it's been, I think they said the last time we took down Alabama was, I believe, 2003 with Matt Jones in Tuscaloosa. And
It's been a long time.
Yeah. So I think it's a long time coming. We were close a couple of years ago when we played down in Tuscaloosa, had them really close, like you said, not necessarily want to call it on the ropes, but we managed to create turnovers and everything. So it'll be interesting to see how this year goes, especially because we know we don't play them next year. So, I don't know how frequently we will start playing them after this year once we do away with divisions.
Yeah, it would be really cool to kind of go out once they end kind of the East-West stuff, go out with a win against Alabama to kind of cap things off in that era, because it's definitely going to feel like a new era of SEC football. I think once Oklahoma and Texas are in, it's obvious that it's definitely going to change the landscape of the SEC, probably college football as a whole too, which is exciting. I'm definitely excited. We've talked about it before, how some of these rivalries have a chance to be renewed, and you're going to see different matchups year in and year out, which is, in my opinion, actually a good thing. You do lose a little bit of the tradition, I think, or there's at least the potential to lose some of the tradition with, Alabama always coming to town every other year, and that's always a huge sellout game. But I definitely think it's going to be exciting, and frankly, I'm kind of glad we don't have to play Alabama every year after 2024.
It's very fair. So, stay tuned in as we advance through the weeks here, we're going to be covering other position groups as we get closer and closer to, that game one. And then we'll have our, start doing our game by game preview episodes, but, stay tuned for that. And so now we'll jump over to some Arkansas basketball news, where it was an interesting report came out the other day that Arkansas transfer guard Keon Minifield, that transferred in from Washington, will be a non-scholarship redshirt for the 23-24 season, which I think really took a lot of people by surprise. And just, why is he going to really honestly sit out? The first option you really go to is, well, did he really have the grades? Is that why he's sitting out? I don't know. It's an interesting situation. And I've heard, the rumor mill can tell you really anything that you want, but the rumor mill is that he could be potentially replaced by another player that hasn't been officially named that he's transferred to Arkansas. Is forward Denijay Harris from Southern Miss. He's a 6'6", 196 forward who only averaged 8.9 points per game last year, 5.6 rebounds, averaged 56.5 from the field goal percentage, 67.8 free throw percentage. He was rumored to transfer to New Mexico State, but when you look at their roster, he's not there. It's been said that he's been in the background of some photos from practice, so nothing's really been officially announced regarding him, but I think this is just an interesting situation as a whole. So what's your take on this whole situation?
Well, I mean, we don't know what we don't know, so I don't know if there's anything, kind of to your point, that's outside of basketball relating to Keon Minifield being a non-scholarship redshirt, or just due to the fact that we were frankly a little bit guard heavy, and maybe Muss went out and addressed that kind of under the radar. I've heard the same thing where Denijay Harris has been practicing with a team for some people have said 3 or 4 weeks now. I don't know how accurate all that is, but anyways, he's a little bit bigger guy, probably has a little bit more defense that he brings. The one question mark to me is, if I remember correctly, Keon Minifield was rumored to probably be one of our only true point guards. Realistically, I think him, and I can't remember the other one.
Leighton Blocker, the freshman?
Yeah, the freshman Leighton Blocker. We're technically going to be kind of our 2 true point guard players. Granted, I think we've got plenty of guys that can fill that point guard / shooting guard role. I don't see a problem there. I really don't. So I understand it completely. I think everybody's just a little surprised that he's, non-scholarship redshirt. Hopefully they got him some NIL money. I'm sure somebody will at some point. I mean, all that being said, I mean, we can sit here and have conjecture on what caused this, but at the end of the day, I think it's not going to be a bad thing for the team as far as, maybe having one less guard and one more forward that's got a little bit more size, and maybe brings a little bit more defense to the Hogs, which we know Muss is a big fan of. So realistically, you look at Denijay Harris's shooting percentage. He didn't score a ton of points per game. 9 points per game is not bad, though. Don't get me wrong. But a 56, almost 57% field goal percentage is pretty solid. Free throws, I'd like to see a little higher at 68%, basically. But that's really not terrible either. So if you get somebody in that, I don't know a ton about his defense. So if he's just a phenom on defense that we don't know about, I mean, halfway in the season, we may be praising Muss and saying this was the best under the radar get that we've ever seen. You never know, but definitely going to be excited to kind of hear how this all shakes out officially when it comes, as far as it comes to like roster spots and everything.
Yeah, that's for sure, especially with him not being announced. But like you said, I think, this is maybe a sign that we're going to rely more on freshman Leighton Blocker coming in. You've also got, you can't forget about L. Ellis. That's, a guard that transferred in from Louisville that will play that, shooting guard, probably point guard role just from his experience. And you've got Devo back, you've got plenty of depth there that, everybody was worried at first whenever all the portal stuff was coming through that we were going to be intensely guard heavy. But now I don't think you're going to have to necessarily worry about that. And you also got your shooting guards, such as, you got Tremont Mark, Devo, Khalif Battle, guys like that. So I think we're going to be fine as far as the guard spots. I think, we've got a ton of like defensive intensity there. All three of those, Devo, Tremont Mark, Leighton Blocker, were all highly ranked in the defensive category when you start looking at, as far as Leighton Blocker on incoming freshmen. He was really high on, defensive, lists. And then when you look at returning guys in the top 10, you had both Devo and Tremont Mark. So, I think you might see this from this season's team, a lot more defensive based team with the offense coming kind of second tune to it. You'll have guys like Brazil that will probably be a focus of the offense this year. So that'll be interesting to see how everything works out.
Yeah, I think somebody we can't forget about that does provide some good height and some really good scoring ability around the rim. I'm just curious to see how his defensive development goes. I thought he got better as the year went on. That's Jalen Graham coming back. He gets overshadowed a little bit, I think, but he's a bigger body fella that I thought ran the floor well last year. I thought his defensive presence could have been a little bit better in spurts, but he did have some good defensive abilities as well, off and on. I just think a little bit of consistency needs to be there on being in the right position at the right time. Seemed like sometimes he'd kind of get out of position and give up some easy, backdoor baskets and things like that really shouldn't have happened. But you get a little bit better in the rotation on defense. I think he's somebody that could really bring a lot of scoring to the offense that maybe a lot of people aren't really thinking about. Everybody's thinking guards, and Brazil. I wouldn't be surprised if Jalen Graham averages, 8 to 12 points a game.
Yeah, that's true. And I think for me, the thing is, it'll be interested to see, like you said, what kind of leash he gets with Musk this season. After, last year we seen he had a pretty tight leash on, one mess up and he was, usually jerked out of the game. And for me, like you said, I like to see that defensive improve. But for me, I think the biggest part to hit with him is, man, you've got to hit your free throws. We can't be shooting 30% from your free throws, especially in a big man role in a must-focus team that's really focused on driving to the basket and getting fouled. We've got to be able to hit our free throws. Those will cost us down the stretch. I think we've seen that this past season in a few games where we struggled to hit our free throws, and that could have been the difference in the game.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So we'll take a quick break here, and we'll be back to talk some Arkansas soccer as that's starting to get fired up here soon. So we'll be back in just a minute.
You know what I like? I like to be comfortable. I also love representing my favorite sports teams. And in the Clutch, I am able to have the best of both worlds. In the Clutch Apparel is your one-stop shop for all things sports. They have officially licensed gear from all your favorite teams and players from the NHL, MLB, NFL, and more. They have sports classic tees from yesteryear and beyond. Check out their full website in the link down below. When you enter the promo code Variety Sports, you get 10% off everything site-wide. Feel comfortable with your sports apparel and go over to their website now at intheclutch.com. And don't forget to use our code Variety Sports to get 10% off.
All right, we are back now. We're going to talk some Arkansas soccer. Arkansas soccer is getting ready to get kicked off actually before football. So Arkansas soccer will have 2 exhibition matches coming up in the next couple of weeks. On August 7th, they'll be taking on Kansas State at 9 a.m. That was a rescheduled game. So, if that time does sound odd to you, that's the reason why, is it had to get rescheduled. And then you've got August 12th versus SIUE. And if you're like me, I had to definitely Google that to figure out who it was. And that is Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville at 6 p.m. that day. So I think we're in for another exciting year of soccer under Arkansas's coach, Kobe Hale.
Yeah, I think one exciting thing, if I remember correctly, they just got new turf on that, or new grass on that soccer field or pitch, I guess. I guess that's the terminology for it. So that's kind of cool. I know there's been some investment into the program, and that's always exciting to see. So I'm not a big soccer fan, I'm gonna be real. But I do try to keep up a little bit on just wins, losses, and everything. So we're excited to keep you guys covered as that gets started this year.
Yeah, and like you said, there's been some investment in this program, like you said, with the new grass coming in this year. Last year, I know they put in new seating throughout the entire stands there. So, with the success they've had, this, investment I think is warranted with, back-to-back, SEC finals and, national soccer, playoffs, just like, tournament and everything like that with success. And so hopefully this year we see, that again, and maybe we can get over the hump and, still be consistently competitive like we have been in the past. And so now we'll move over to Arkansas baseball as, news here that Arkansas again will be playing in the 2024 college baseball series at Global Life Field down in Arlington. They'll be playing there's 2 weekends of this series, and in the weekend that Arkansas will be playing, they're going to be in a field with Michigan, Oklahoma State, and Oregon State. I don't know about you, but 2 of those teams have, definitely memories regarding baseball. One good, one not so good. So, that'll be interesting to see how those matchups go as that is one of the early college baseball kind of round robin tournament type situations that Arkansas will be participating in.
Yeah, I don't know just a whole lot about Michigan, honestly. But the Oklahoma State, Oregon State teams, man, there's some, I don't want to say bad blood there. I don't think it's bad blood necessarily, but like you said, just history. And I think the desire to win, especially against those 2 teams, it just seems like there's always a little bit of extra hype whenever we play those guys in orange. And so I thought that was an exciting draw. I mean, it's going to be early in the year, so wins, losses don't really matter at that point. You're just trying to see your guys, what you got, see what you got on your team, especially the way the transfers are now. You got so many new faces on teams and stuff. It's just these tournaments are really critical, and knowing who you got, where your lineups need to shake out to, especially if you can avoid injuries and things. I know our lineup seemed like it bounced all over the place last year with just who was hurt and who wasn't. But these are the games that you really, really find out who's who from a SEC caliber perspective, where your guys are going to shake out. It's early, so you can't take too much from it, but it's going to be exciting, man. I always love that. The worst part about it is it's always hard to watch because it's always on Flow Baseball, and I try to catch it on Twitch somehow every year and always catch a game or 2. But that's the worst part, is it's kind of hard to watch these games, but they're still exciting though.
Yeah, that's true. And, like you said, petition against Flow Baseball, get it on, actual TV so everybody can watch it. But still in regards to baseball, moving on from that, talking about our roster for next season, I saw it today where I think they officially said, every Arkansas player, whether that be a signee or guy that left, they've all officially signed their deals. I think the one that was waiting on today was Jackson Wiggins, who finally signed his deal today, come to agreement on his deal. So I think all of those guys have officially, come to an agreement, got some type of deal signed. So we really know for sure those guys are gone. Those signees are, going pro. So we kind of start to see how that roster is going to break down. We know all the signees that will be coming in. Dave Van Horn could go out and still get a few more guys out of the portal. I know a big one that, Arkansas got last week was the pitcher from Texas Tech, Molina. He's a big guy that's coming in that I think could easily find himself in the rotation next season for one of the weekend starting roles. He had really great numbers at Texas Tech this past season, and I think that's one thing that, could be helpful. And, as we're trying to replace some of these guys, you've got Hagen Smith and Brady Tigert back, 2 guys that are most likely going to be your weekend starters. We thought Hunter Holland might be back and could add a third there, but with him, signing a deal with the Reds, it'll be interesting to see who we sign and bring in to fill that role. And I think he could be one of those guys.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also got to throw out a plug there for McIntyre. I wouldn't be surprised if, I think we've talked about it before, if he's one of the weekend rotation guys, at least early on. as far as a starter role, whether it be, your Sunday afternoon guy. I don't know. Just because he gives you some stability until maybe, later in the season, kind of how we did last year, kind of figure out, actually we need to be pitching Hunter Holland there or whatever the case may be, to where you can have McIntyre more than a relief role and get more bigger innings out of him across several different games in a series potentially. I think he had some big outings for us in multiple games, especially in like the regionals and everything. He really was a workhorse for us. Unfortunately, things didn't go great, but he's definitely got that potential to kind of be plugged in wherever he's needed. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him be a weekend starter, at least for the first few weeks of the year, just with his veteran mentality that he brings, until you can really kind of figure out who needs to be in that role long term for the year.
Yeah, that's true. And, I think what jumps out to me is when you look at Mason Molina, that's the name of the Texas Tech pitcher that is coming in. When you start looking at his stats and breaking down his stats, he's got some eye-popping stats here. A 3.67 ERA, which is, an average decent ERA for a guy that could be in a starting role. He went 6-2 in games that he, got the decision for. And so he pitched 83.1 innings. So heavy workload there for the Texas Tech Red Raiders. But in those 83.1 innings, he had 108 strikeouts and only walked or hit by pitch 5 guys. And so he has a really great, strikeout ratio there. But also if you look at his whiff, it's 1.176. So
Wow.
He's a really good strike thrower, but also is really good about getting guys out, with heavy innings, with a lot of strikeouts. I think that's something that, was no question for Dave to go out and, grab him out of the portal, especially with him looking for somewhere else to go.
Yeah, that's big numbers right there. I mean, I like you said, I could definitely see a starting role or a long relief type role where he comes in and pitches multiple games in a series also. I mean, there's a lot of potential. It's just going to kind of depend on where his mentality, where he fits in the best from a mental standpoint, if he's more comfortable starting or if he's more comfortable closing or whatever the case may be. You've got guys, realistically, our lineup is shaking out to where you've got several guys that kind of seem like they fit that mold, where they're not necessarily a true starter or a true closer. They all have the instinct to kind of do either one. Obviously, Hagen Smith is phenomenal at whatever task you give him. Brady Tigert showed he's the same way. Can be a deadly closer, can be a good starter that can get you 5-6 innings. Obviously, Will McIntyre, he's a utility knife. You never know. I mean, he can do anything for you. Depending on how Mason comes in, I mean, you may have another guy that's the same way. I just the flexibility there that we have already between kind of those 3 guys and then maybe some others. I think Cody Frank is back, if I remember correctly, and I already thought that he kind of could have been a starter / long reliever, whatever you needed out of him. So there's going to be some good flexible options there, even more so than maybe we had last year. Frankly, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, and another new breaking news transfer that just came through, according to the old Twitter, is Arkansas has signed transfer outfielder Lincoln Riley. And no, not the former Oklahoma coach Lincoln Riley, but Lincoln Riley from EIU, who, if that sounds familiar, Arkansas played them. So he's a guy that is familiar with the Arkansas program, played against Arkansas, but it came out, today that he is going to be transferring to Arkansas. And he started 59 games at center field for EIU last year, where he slashed a 3.07 ERA with a 4.23 and 4.24 as far as slugging percentage and on base percentages.
That's solid. It's definitely solid. I feel like I remember seeing him in a couple of those games. I definitely thought he was SEC caliber talent. I thought he played well against us, if it's who I'm thinking of correctly.
Right. And so, I think that's a big get to, especially with Dave addressing, we know Yosenberger's gone, our center fielder. We're having to replace him. We've got a few other guys that are coming in. We're having to essentially replace the entire outfield with the exception of we don't know what's going to happen with Kendall Diggs, whether he's going to get an outfield spot or, stay in that DH role. But we got those few transfers in from Missouri that's coming in that played outfield roles. So I think Dave is really preparing to revamp this outfield, with what he's done so far.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You got some good freshmen coming in too. I mean, we lost a few freshmen from last year that transferred out. Mason Neville comes to mind, who I thought had the potential to be a pretty good outfielder for us, but things didn't, work out correctly. And I get that. Guys need to go where they're gonna be able to play. But there's going to be some big changes out there, but I definitely don't think there's going to be much of a downgrade as far as defensive ability and offensive ability both. Losing Josenberger hurts because I really thought he had a tremendous year for us. He was a defensive highlight reel out there, and then he really did a great job in that leadoff spot for us, being able to get on base and swipe some bases with his speed. So that may be kind of some tough shoes to fill, but outside of that, I think it's not going to be too terribly hard to kind of fill the holes that we're losing in the outfield. Warford had some great hits for us, and so did Wagner, but I don't think they were just absolute barn burn speedsters out there that had crazy defensive highlights all the time. They made some great plays, don't get me wrong, but I think you can replace those pieces with, your guys from Mizzou and things like that, especially guys that hit well last year, even in the SEC. So I'm excited, man. It's going to be a totally different team. Seems like that's going to be the way of the world nowadays, but it's going to be an exciting one to watch.
Very true. So while on the subject of the Diamonds here, we've got an exciting guest for our Hog Talk segment this week. Former Arkansas softball player, newest assistant coach with Arkansas, played for Arizona State in 2018 and at Arkansas from 19 to 22. Hit .445 with 20 home runs and 70 RBIs her senior year. Led the SEC in batting average and became Arkansas's all-time RBI leader her senior year, and was instrumental in that super regionals run that Arkansas had. Get ready to welcome to the show in this Hog Talk segment, former Arkansas softball player and newest assistant coach, Danielle Gibson. All right, we are excited to welcome to this week's episode of Hog Talk, former Arkansas softball player and new assistant coach at the University of Arkansas, Danielle Gibson. So we'll start with you. How's things going? How's life right now?
It's great. It's, I still feel like there's a lot of pinch me moments where I feel that it doesn't feel like this is my life. I mean, I'm playing ball right now in Chicago for Athletes Unlimited, which is always a dream. And then obviously having exciting news and exciting things to go back to in Fayetteville. I just feel like I feel so fortunate and so blessed.
That's awesome to hear. Well, I know we were kind of talking a little bit that we're just really excited to have you back on staff. We talked a little bit before the show, and we talked last episode as well. Just kind of big time congratulations goes out to you for sure. I know a lot of the fans around the state are going to be excited to have you back. I think there's going to be even extra things to cheer for now from a softball perspective. So definitely an exciting time for you, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. It really is like a dream. People always ask me, did you just not like Georgia or what was the deal there? And the thing is that I love Georgia so much. The one job that would take me away opened and was offered. And so, I mean, why would I not come back and be on the hill again and be in front of all the Hog fans? It's great.
Yeah. And so with that, we'll kind of rewind a little bit and go back down memory lane. So what was your recruiting process like in high school?
So in high school, I had some looks from a lot of different schools. I feel like in college, I developed into a very different player than I was in high school. And so in high school, I was skinny, quick, played up the middle, and just my game was based off of speed. And so as I grew older and as I understood my body more and how to gain muscle and how to get stronger and all that, I really developed into a power hitter and into a first baseman, corner, that type of role. And so in high school, I was originally recruited by Arizona State, and I committed there when I was 14. And under a couple coaching changes, I ended up playing for Trisha Ford my first year at ASU, and she's now in the SEC as well at A&M. But I played there 1 year. I had a great time. We went to the World Series. We won a lot of games there, and I had a really good first year. I just wanted something more out of the clubhouse aspect of things, and so Courtney Deifel came calling when I put my name in the transfer portal, and I mean, it just felt right. She showed me around Arkansas and just made me feel as if I was important off the field as just as much as on the field. And so it just was a different vibe in Fayetteville. And yeah, I still feel the same way, that there's no really other place like Fayetteville, Arkansas, and the Arkansas Razorbacks.
We're definitely glad you decided to transfer. I think that ended up working out for pretty much everybody. I know Coach Deifel had a lot to do with it, but it was a lot of the players, like yourself, that kind of got softball back on the map, if you can say that, in Fayetteville. I know the fan turnout over the last 2 years has basically tripled since 3-4 years ago, if I remember the stats correctly. And so that's credit to a lot of you guys. Obviously, Coach Deifel being able to bring the right players in, but you guys as players are so easy to root for, and I think that's a reason why we're also excited to have you back as an assistant. But I think how well you guys were able to execute, and then just the personalities that you all have, you can see it just even on TV anyways on y'all's games. Very easy team to root for, and it really got softball back on the map for the Hogs, and that's been so awesome to see over the last 2-3 years.
Yeah, and I think the fans aspect of it, like, I think that this has become such a transfer powerhouse because the fans do such a good job embracing these newcomers. They don't give them judgment about what they're transferring for. They don't, really care to know all the deep details. They're just happy that they're Hogs. And so it's just so comforting for me to see these transfer kids knowing their stories, not knowing their stories, knowing that they're going to come in and be accepted and just be cheered for all the time nonstop by these Hog fans. And it's like, we talked about KB Sides last week of, she had so much pride in her home state of Alabama. And it's great. It's great that she can feel pride and have gone to the University of Alabama. But then now she identifies as a Razorback just for being here for 1 year. And so it's just so cool to see that the fans have just, gravitated towards her and her also feel comfortable and doing well. I mean, she was a huge piece of the puzzle that year. So.
Yeah. And so you briefly hit on it, but kind of walk us through. So you entered the transfer portal, what made you specifically choose Arkansas?
That's a great question. So I was fortunate enough to have a couple schools kind of looking at me, and it's funny, Georgia being one of them. So I have known that staff for a little bit, and it just kind of full circle for me too. But it was G. Juarez and I, we were both at Arizona State. And so we both entered the transfer portal at the same time. We were like, we're going to the same place. We are all in, no matter what, we're going as a package deal. And so one weekend, I was like, I just don't think we need to go to OU. I think we need to go to another program. Nothing against OU. I just don't really see us both, living in Norman and realistically doing what we want to do. And so she goes to Norman on a visit, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, without me? Like, we're supposed to go together. And so I said, you know what, that I'm going to go to Arkansas because that's where I feel like I need to go. And I feel like is a great spot. And so she committed to OU when she was there. So I knew that this was going to be my decision. And on my visit here, we had gone to we had done some things, but then we ended a night at Coach Deifel's house where her husband Joe cooked for us and made this big boil, and this all the girls were there. There's a couple girls there that are from my hometown, so I had knew kind of growing up. And then the next morning, the morning that I leave, here comes Hunter Yurchek and the Einstein Bagels to just kind of say hi and show the importance of the fact that they wanted me to be a Razorback. And so the fact that from the head of athletics is bought into the recruiting process, is bought into softball, was just like, okay, this place can go big if they buy in and they get kids who are going to buy in. And from that point on, I was bought in. I was a Razorback. I think I took a week or so to commit just because I had some other schools that I was looking at, but I knew when I got on campus that that was the place. So
That's an awesome story about Hunter Yurchek. We've had nothing but high praises for him on the show here. I mean, he's in our eyes done a really, really phenomenal job just on coaching hires, and then you can tell how bought in he is just for the student athletes. I think he really does put the student athletes first in his mind, and everything just kind of cascades into place from there. It's pretty easy to see that. But you touched on it a little bit, but just kind of go into what it's like playing for Coach Deifel. You talked about kind of going to her house, hanging out, getting her husband to cook for you guys and all that. But what's it like playing for her as a coach?
she's competitive as the next person in line. I mean, she is the epitome of like trying to win no matter what, and doing what it takes to win. And so that's always something I've admired from her. But she's also not one to screw relationships over just winning just because winning is what makes money for her. She's into doing it the right way. She's into creating those relationships long lasting, and you just see it in all the alums that she still connects with and talks with all the time. It's like they'll FaceTime her, she answers the FaceTime. It doesn't matter what time of day. She's in it for the girls. And so I think that's why she does it. And I think that for me, wanting to be exactly like her and just have the job and have the family and have the husband and have the relationships, like why would I not want to learn and be hand in hand with someone that I admire so much? And she creates a lot of energy, but competitive energy. She's not like rah crazy energy, but she is competitive. I'll say that. And I'll keep saying it till the cows come home, is she's competitive as anyone. It's just funny seeing her in practice too, and now watching her from the other dugout when I was here at Georgia, be competitive and see things that I didn't normally see when I was playing, but kind of just keep my eyes on her. She's the best of the best.
Yeah, and so that's a cool story. Now we've talked in the past about just how intense and competitive she is. We've had a few episodes back we've talked to KB before, and we've a few weeks ago talked to Kylie Halverson. And so what was the transition like from playing at Arizona State in the Pac-12 to coming over to Arkansas in the SEC?
Oh boy, there's a lot difference. I was able to play for another female head coach at ASU, and so I just think that there's a connection aspect between female heads to obviously female student athletes, especially to coaches who are successful at their schools as being student athletes back in their time and their collegiate careers. And so that connection is really big. But I mean, the money is in the SEC. You can tell that these schools provide so much for their student athletes, just not in the facility aspect, but like student athlete development, career development, things that are going to go along a lot longer in your life than just the 4 years of playing collegiate. And so having those resources the Jones Center, student athlete development is in there, and the nutrition's in there, and it's like they have all these different, NIL is in there now. They have all these different tools that can help student athletes after they graduate. And that's what separates them, in my opinion, is the fact that they are bought into the athlete long term, instead of their, just come and play for us for 4 years, get us a couple championships, and then, see you later. They're in it for the long run. And that's just special to me. I don't really feel like I see a lot of other universities doing that. More in the SEC, but that's something that definitely I've been able to really understand that's important too. So
yeah, that's pretty cool. I know I've heard that kind of from multiple other people, just around the way that it seems like SEC universities, you always see people come back, whether they had pro careers in sports, they're able to come back to the state, get jobs in law firms, things like that, just kind of due to their connections they made at the U of A. So there's definitely some pros that come along with student athlete connections that you build early on that can really help you all the way down the line. We've talked about that before in previous episodes as well. There's big names all over the state doing different careers and things like that once they got back from their pro days or coaching days or whatever the case may be. And so I think you really hit the nail on the head there. The opportunities that some of these SEC schools and obviously the U of A can provide is bar none, and that's definitely an awesome thing to see. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like these people who they have hired to work in these athletic development, career development will like jump through hoops just to help student athletes with one simple thing. And they're for the people. They're the athletes people. It's really cool to see.
So speaking of pro careers, what's it been like playing for Athletes Unlimited? Kind of fill us in on what that is and how that's been going for you.
So Athletes Unlimited is a innovative scoring non-traditional softball league where it is valuing the individual's game just as much as the team's game. So you get points based off of your success on the field as well as your team success on the field, whether you're winning games, winning specific innings, hitting home runs, hitting singles. There's just all these points to be had. And then they, after 5 weeks of games, they crown a winner. And so it's really cool that last year there was a first year position player has won and not a pitcher. And so that is great for us position players to see that it is possible to outscore the pitchers. But it's great. It's a way that I get to, we change teams weekly. And so it's a way that I get to connect and meet a lot of new people. And that other networking aspect of things is great. It's just being able to pick the brains of other coaches that also play and being able to see what they do and share stories and share ideas. That's what's I think that I value the most is being able to make those connections. Obviously, I love to play the game. Playing is definitely something that I don't take for granted. I know a lot of people don't have this opportunity. And so, but I do like the connection aspect. I love the relationships. I mean, I'm this team that I'm on for week 1 is Haley McClenny's team. She was played at the University of Alabama, a USA great. She is now I get to say one of my good friends. And that is just something that like makes my little kid heart watching her playing college just so happy. And so it's cool. It's cool to play with some of these kids that I looked up to when I was little, when I was a youngster.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. That's really cool. And I think, like you said, it's a new innovative way for softball. And I think it's probably one of the things that is continuing to help grow the game. And as the popularity continues to grow as far as, you know, not only just the college level, but also like that pro level now. And so, you know, we talked about it too. So for you, what did you feel like you learned or got the most out of your one season at Georgia as a grad assistant?
Yeah, so there I was their volunteer coach. So I got to work with Tony Baldwin, which I think is one of the best offensive, if not the best offensive minded coaches in the game. He is just like connection, but understands hitting to an elite level. He's a student of the game, no matter how much he knows. He's always looking to learn and to incorporate more things. But he also was able to learn from also one of the greatest coaches, Coach Lou. She retired a couple years ago, but so Tony really like let me do a lot of things that most volunteer coaches don't have the responsibility to do. And so I am extremely appreciative for that. He allowed me to work with the girls just one-on-one and be really hands-on my first year. And so the trial and error and being able to see what I like to incorporate into myself and into my philosophy hitting wise is something that I'm just extremely grateful for, because I know from experience watching a lot of volunteer coaches, they don't get a lot of opportunities to do that and to actually coach. And so I felt like I was in it with the conversations. He valued what I had to say. He valued the way that I approached the game. And so we very similar minded, but my mind is very statistical, learning about pitch sequencing, pitch calling, all that kind of stuff that you have to scout and watch film on, and where he was just like kind of a little bit more old school of developing the hitter swing, watching their own swing on video, and then being able to do that. So me being able to pick his brain on how to develop hitters, and then also him understanding that I can pick pitches really well. I can understand sequencing, scouting pitchers, opposing pitchers. We are able to kind of pick each other's brains on those. And so I felt valued because he valued me in that aspect, and that isn't necessarily how Georgia always operated. And so I felt like I really enjoyed being around the girls. But it's just something that I enjoy. I mean, I don't think I'll ever see myself out of the game. It's just a part of me, and it's a part of who I've been my entire life. And why would I not use it as an advantage, you know?
I completely agree with that one. Use your tools to your advantage for sure. So I can't help but think that that's going to kind of help transition into your coaching career at Arkansas, and being able to take that experience along with you is going to be critical, I think. So kind of with that in mind, what are your expectations for this Arkansas team next season, especially with you being able to kind of help do some of the coaching?
I mean, we have a lot of really, really good athletes, which also, when you have good athletes, that makes the coach's life a lot easier. And so it makes us look a little bit better than maybe we really are. That's what always Tony used to say. He's like, man, we just have really good athletes, and that helps us look good. It helps us as a staff look really good. And so no matter what my role is, I'm kind of going in to be a hitting guru, helping with infield. No matter what my specific role is going to be, these kids can just flat out compete. And so I'm excited to watch them and be their biggest fan in it, and knowing that I felt that from the staff when I was there, and giving them that, if not more of that, as their student athlete careers. They only got a couple more years to do this, and so I want them to feel supported, appreciated, but also feel like they've got some competitive energy from their coaching staff in the dugout when they go out there and compete.
Yeah, that's very true. And, we talked about on previous episodes too, you just mentioned the, incredible athletes that, are there and have come in. We mentioned, it looks like next year there's not going to be a hole in the lineup with the returnees that are coming there, the big hitting transfers that have came in. So what do you see as far as offensive wise you think this team could be?
I think that they have a really good chance to compete with, I think, the lineup that we had a couple years ago, as we had some really big bats. I think we were like a top 3 run producing team in the country. I think this team can be better than that. I think that this team can develop into an extremely well-rounded, all facets of the game. We got speed now with Reagan Johnson. We've got some power with Brie Ellis, and getting Hannah Gamble in that as well. I think that we're going to have a lot of fun with these kids, and being able to just play regular softball, and doing what the game asked of us. Because I think that we had KB in our lineup, but having a lot more speed and having the ability to run the bases really well, I think will be really good for us this year. And so I'm excited. We've got a really good freshman class coming in too. I just went out and watched them play down at their PGF tournament in Huntington Beach, and it's the future is bright for the Razorbacks, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, speaking of that recruiting class, I think it ended up being the #1 ranked nationally recruiting class for the 2024 year, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 2024 is #1. Mm-hmm.
That is obviously a big shout out to Coach Deifel right there and all the rest of the assistants. Really, I know recruiting it's a group effort, so that is really awesome to see from just a fan's perspective. The ability of our coaches to go out and get players like that maybe in 10 years past we weren't able to do that. So it's definitely a testament to players like you helping put the program on the map, coaches like Deifel helping put the program on the map, and then the ability they're able to achieve on going out and getting all these elite level players it's really, really cool to see. Definitely exciting.
I get excited because all these players that get to come in and transfer in get to really see how special Arkansas is, and that makes me happy. And then their families come and see how special Arkansas is, and then their friends come and see how special it is. It's just the snowball effect of really people getting to appreciate Northwest Arkansas.
I was about to say, that's big, from Coach Deifel, like we've talked about. She can never stops finding ways to improve and continuing to build this program. And I think that's big, especially like with next year with, OU coming to the conference. That's going to, I feel like, turn into some big matchups between, Arkansas and them, with them joining the SEC now. So that I think that could be big for recruiting as well.
Totally. I feel like we go up head to head a lot with a lot of recruits with OU and Arkansas. And so in previous years, we have been successful in coming out on top with those certain recruits. And hopefully when they get into the SEC, they'll choose to be Razorbacks and not Sooners. So, or fingers crossed, we're getting there. We're getting there in our recruiting to be able to beat OU out, which is great.
I think you got to give them their credit. They kind of set the bar for everybody in the softball world. I know everybody's trying to kind of catch up, and I definitely think Arkansas is on the right track in all facets of it, just from a coaching standpoint, the ability of the players on the field, the way the transfer portal works, and just recruiting as a whole. So it's definitely a cool time to be a Hog fan right now, especially when it comes to softball.
Totally. I mean, it's great that we have Norman just 3 hours away and get to learn from a program that has really built a really strong women's team in softball. And I mean, they've done it to the best of the history's ability. And so it's cool to be able to see in our time that is true and that is able, physically capable of doing. So hats off to them. They're truly doing something right over there.
Yeah,
Very true.
Yeah. And so as we get ready to wrap up here, kind of fun question. So, you're very heavily involved in it, but those few times when you're not playing softball, what do you like to do? And kind of on that, any big plans for the summer? I know it's getting close to, school starting back, so maybe not much time for that.
I am a lake person to the core. So whenever we had a couple weeks in the middle of seasons between AU seasons, my husband and I went out to the lake multiple times. It's great to be able to sit on the lake, sit on a lily pad, go in, sit out by the campfire, go out and do water sports. It's really that anything. I mean, water sports is great because I'm still extremely competitive and get that fix from it. But I just love the water. I love to fish. I love to do all that.
He's a lake bum like us.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so as we're wrapping up here, we appreciate you taking the time. We're excited to have you back here in Arkansas. I was at the Georgia game last year where they gave you the signed ball and everything, and I know that was probably really special for you. And so I think when that news broke, everybody was excited to have you back, and we're glad you're back, and we got to take this time to talk to you, and we appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and I'm extremely happy to be back. Happy to be on. And excited to be back on the hill.
Definitely. We'll be on the lookout. Hopefully see you out on the lake or something like that. Good luck up there playing ball during the summer, okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks again for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
And as always, here at the Woo Pig Weekly Podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also don't forget to go check out. We have a new, Facebook fan page that you can go check out, Woo Pig Weekly, where we'll be also be posting the episodes as well. And as always, thank you for listening to today's episode of Woo Pig Weekly, and we'll get back right here next week.